And welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Peter Winick. I'm the founder and CEO of Thought Leadership Leverage. And you're joining us on the podcast today, which is Leveraging Thought Leadership. Today, my guest is Amy Radin. Amy is at the forefront of rewiring brands for the future that is upon us. She built a track record of success moving ideas to performance at American Express, Citi, E-Trade, and AXA, a couple of small little companies there. She's got a new book that is on its way out, or probably actually out by now, which is called the Change Makers Playbook. So she's interesting in terms of being incredibly accomplished, but relatively new to sort of shifting gears into this domain of being into the content business and author and thought leader and all that sort of stuff. So thanks for coming on board today, Amy.
Peter, it's great to be here and happy to be part of Leveraging Thought Leadership.
Thank you. Thank you. So the first question is why and why now? Why did you decide to make the leap into the content universe? And why did you decide to do that now, actually?
Yeah. Well, as you know, I spent quite a few number of years in the corporate world, and always always a little bit more as the person who had the outside perspective. So the innovator, always seeing things differently. And when you get to very senior levels at the kinds of companies I've worked at, that's not always the most comfortable place to be. So a number of years ago, interestingly, a friend of mine who's a journalist said, you ought to write a book about this. And I sort of parked that idea. And then when I ultimately decided that I would rather truly be the outsider looking in and helping people trying to innovate, actually drive change, I said, I should try to write that book. So it was sort of a little bit serendipity, a little bit madness, and a little bit planned.
So touch on something that you said that I think is interesting. When you're the insider with sort of, that's an outlier, for lack of a better term,
right?
There's a risk profile there that's not always fun, right? But when you're the outsider, that's the outlier, they're paying you to say, uh-oh, that's broken, that doesn't work, that's dumb. Tell me a little bit about sort of the difference or the freedom of one versus the other.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, and you're exactly right. So the roles that I always played, no matter what my title, I always gravitated to roles where I was rethinking the way things were. And when you're in a big company, it's just hard to be that person. And because big companies are set up to make things predictable, routine, eliminate risk. And I was the person who was sort of saying, no, we have to change things. What I realized was, exactly to your point, executives and companies hire people and are very welcoming of people who are coming in just for a little while to bring a fresh perspective, but then they go away. And so I said, this is a great way for me to realize my purpose, which really is to look at things differently and help people rethink things and be sort of not have the target on my back, but actually be somebody who's welcome and compensated purely because I can bring a fresh perspective.
Well, and as the outsider, right, you have the freedom of not having the horse in the race. So besides the fact that companies are designed to sort of get a predictable outcome, underneath that is sort of the invisible, the politics, the silos, the protection, the budget protection, all like if you've got a new idea, inherently it means someone's going to win and someone's going to lose, status, prestige, whatever, inside the company. So there is a little bit of, internal sabotaging, or at least not, I mean, that might be a strong word, but even if it's a great idea, when it comes from an insider, there's a lot of ways for someone to sort of, bop you down like a groundhog video game or something.
Well, you're right. And whenever you have two people in a room, you're going to have politics. And I don't think that's, I don't say that with any facetiousness or cynicism. That's just the reality of human nature. And also, you have budgets. And when there's a budget, there's only so much money to go around. And so you're right. Some projects get funded and some don't. And you're also exactly right in saying that for me, being the outsider making recommendations, although I care a lot about what I do and I want my clients to be successful, I'm not personally on the line to make sure the idea that I propose gets implemented. So I can be much more objective and a little more emotionally detached. And that's really great. And I like that a lot. I can be even more objective than when I was on the inside and had to worry about politics.
So this was your first book. So let's start there. What was that like, writing your first book? We'll get into sort of post-writing, but step one is write a book. So what made you decide to do that? And then what has that process been like for you?
Right. Well, my family's really glad it's over. I'll say that up front. Um, but as I said, a friend of mine who's a journalist who heard me, talking about innovation and everything I believe about how you execute innovation, which is really what the Change Makers Playbook is about. He planted this bug in my head about writing a book, and after a couple of false starts on my own, I said, this actually takes some skill. And I engaged somebody on a contract basis who's a professional writer to help me make sure I had a book, structure the outline, and then I'd say she acted as my accountability manager. She stayed on my case. We had monthly calls. She reviewed my draft, so she was sort of a working editor.
So yeah, let me drill down on that a little bit. So number one is there's a continuum, a spectrum of getting help for writing a book, right? One could be even under the rubric of sort of a ghostwriter. In some instances, that's somebody that's actually doing the heavy lifting and the scribing to capture your voice and do all that. On the other end of the spectrum is a coach, an accountability partner, someone that might help you write a proposal. So something along the way got you to realize that I could use some help here, but then underneath that is at what degree. So how did you sort of unpack that?
Right. Well, I realized after many false starts, I said, probably, for over the course of a few months, trying to start to write, I realized, wow, there's a lot to this. And then really just networking. I spoke to people I know who've published business books and asked them their stories. How did you do it? How did you go about it? And so I understood. I started to realize how often people bring somebody else in, either a co-author or somebody, the writing partner who I worked with. I realized I didn't want a ghostwriter. I mean, my feelings about innovation and my beliefs, the expertise I have, was all inside my head. So I basically was unpacking a couple of decades of knowledge and experience, and I couldn't imagine sending somebody else off to write it. Plus, in the course of the book of writing, one of the things I did to make it really more fun and robust was I ended up doing research interviews.
Oh, that's great.
So for each chapter of the book, once I had the outline, I did about 7 or 8 subject matter expert interviews. So I would do the interviews, take my notes, organize the chapter, send it out for review. So it was very collaborative, but very much unpacking what was inside my head, which was why I really had to, hold the reins of doing the writing. But for other people, ghostwriting is a solution.
Right. But it sounds like the partner that you picked and the process by which you chose to worked for you, because there is no right or wrong one way that's right or wrong. You found the right.
There is no one
Yeah.
way. It's what's the problem? It's like any business problem. What's the problem you're trying to solve? What's your work style?
Sure.
What is it you're trying to do? And for me, this was a great solution.
Got it. So what, if anything, might you do differently or recommend folks consider if you were to go about this again?
Well, when I went out, and as I said, I spoke to a number of people I know who had written books before, and people gave me fairly consistent advice, and all the advice I didn't listen to. The next time around, I would listen to it. And number one is to really block be very disciplined about blocking time on a weekly basis when you're going to write and stick to it. So I'd give myself about a B minus on that.
Okay.
And I think that's just really having that discipline and clearing the decks. And I wish, and in that case, my elapsed time would have been shorter. So from beginning to end, the elapsed time from when I kicked off to actually put my pencil down and turned over my manuscript was about 16 months. And I could have, next time, if there is a next time, I'd say, wow, can I do this in 6 to 9 by just concentrating more time and maintaining that schedule discipline.
Got it. So now that you're at the place where the book is in the process of launching, what are your goals and hopes, right? So let's say it's a year from now and all those are achieved. What would that look like? What does that mean to you?
Well, to me, the book is just the first manifestation of what I hope is a content platform. And I'm still in the process of experimenting and defining what that is going to mean. But I say, I have some very unique expertise that's gone into the Change Makers Playbook because I was a chief innovation officer and an operating executive accountable for delivering results on a topic that most people just talk about And frankly, that often, results don't pan out.
So wait, so the number one piece, let me just pause there for a second because I think it's an important point, is the why the hell should anybody listen to you piece, right? So been there,
Right.
done that, executive. So because again, there's ranges of why where someone comes from in terms of perspective in writing a book. There's sort of the theoretical academic, right? There's the consultant that's been there on the outside and has lots of experience working on various projects, and then there's the senior level corporate executive, been there, done that, knows how to actually get stuff done inside the constraints of a corporate environment. I think big check in the box there for why anyone should listen to you, as opposed to this is a theoretical.
Right. I am not an academic and I am not a consultant in a field where there's a lot of great thinking, but a big gap on doing. So I sort of bring the thinking and the doing together. And what I'm seeing is I've really been trying to follow the advice of a coach I had years ago who said, Amy, you have to listen to the market and see how they value you. And where people are valuing my content is for example, advising startups on how to establish business relationships with corporations. I sort of understand how to work both sides of the aisle as a board member, as a keynote speaker, as a workshop facilitator. So I'm right now in the process of experimenting with a whole bunch of different ideas that I'm being approached on as I socialize my content and increase awareness of who I am and what I have to offer. And my hope is over the course of the next, say, 6 to 12 months, I'll refine that. I'm trying to be an innovator.
Sure.
Now I'm going to try different things and see what works, what not work, what doesn't work, and shape my commercial platform off the content over the course of the next year.
Got it. And you might find the market says it resonates at the sort of training level where people want to learn how to do this, right? It could be at the most senior level, at the board level, where they're going to bring you in as the Uber rock star that helps them crack a real business problem that they're struggling with. It might be somewhere in the middle, because one of the things that's interesting about the content that you've got is there's lots of places it could be applied, but underneath that would dictate from a strategic perspective the pricing, the derivative offerings and solutions that you would commercialize or monetize, et cetera. And you could ultimately have sort of the same light bulb, the same idea be worth X or 10X, depending on where it's deployed and the value that's assigned to it by those that are suffering from what, your content helps them get through.
Clearly. And I think a great example of that would be I do some work with very large corporations, but also with startups. So the pricing model, the compensation structures are very different. If you're working with an earlier stage startup, you're talking about success fees or maybe equity. You're not billing at an hourly or day rate, right? Versus for a corporation, there's a very, it's can more often be time and materials. So you have to sort of understand what's the pricing model depending upon the life stage of the client and what they're trying to
And you
accomplish.
don't have to have it's not a binary choice. You might choose that the right portfolio of client mixes to you is, X% startup, which is high risk, but could potentially be high reward, X%, large companies because it pays the bills, and, balance that portfolio and your time accordingly, right? Because you probably don't want to go all risk or all fee for service or something like that. So,
That's right, and I love the variety. So for me, this has turned out to be a great way to leverage my thought leadership because I on top of doing the work I love, I get to do it in a range of very very different situations with very diverse kinds of people.
got it. So you're is an interesting, I think, an interesting question. You'll tell me. For you, you're literally on the cusp of the launch here. We're in the process of launching the book, like any minute here.
Any minute.
Yeah, right. It's like I see the countdown clock here, like it's New Year's, right? What do you have planned from a tactical perspective? What are some of the things that you're going to do to get the book out there? And when I say out there, meaning to the right people that you are focused on to get you the results that you're looking for.
Right. So I have a very active social media calendar.
Okay,
And so I'm out on social media. This is marketing 101, top of the funnel. How do I maximize awareness with the kinds of people who I would like to know? I'd like them to know I exist, right? So a daily presence on social media, speaking engagements of all types, everything from panels at major conferences to keynotes to smaller audiences, to some board meetings, executive roundtable. I'm really working my network to book as much speaking as my calendar can handle. And some of it globally on video conferences. It's been really interesting. I've done video talks to South Africa, to India. So it's really a lot of fun what you can do these days because the technology is so good.
Awesome. So you've got a lot of things planned. They're focused. They're aligned with your goals. Sort of last thoughts as we start to wrap up here. Anything that you've learned along the way, because you've done a lot of sort of research and talking to other authors and speakers, etc. Anything that you learned that at first blush was like, oh my God, that can't be true. That's silly. That's crazy. That you've come to realize is actually the way it is.
I think the thing is that's a little it's a little maddening some days, but really turned out to be true no matter what, is how many opportunities come about through pure serendipity. And so the whole experience has reinforced to me why it's so important to build a really good network where I can give as much as possible to other people and they turn out to come back with opportunities, but it's very unpredictable. So the good news is I've I think been pretty good about building and caring for my network over the years. And I am getting a lot of great outreach as a result. Some days you wish you knew what was coming. You
Yeah,
just
that'd be
don't.
nice, right?
So it's very serendipitous. I think that's the thing I've had to kind of accept and try to enjoy a little more.
Awesome. Well, I thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing your journey to date. I wish you the best with the launch of the book, and I'd love to have you back in whatever 6 months or so and say, well, how did that work out? What'd you learn, and what worked out according to plan, and serendipitously what came to be, and all that sort of fun stuff.
Yeah, no, that would be great. And also, certainly, if your listeners want to visit amyradin.com, I also, part of my marketing plan was really, to make a bit of an investment in my website. There's content that can be downloaded, and so to the extent that I can be helpful to other people like me, a lot of lessons learned reflected in the way I've put my website together.
Awesome. I appreciate that. Well, thank you so much, and we'll talk again soon. Thanks.
Thank you, Peter.
To learn more about Thought Leadership Leverage, please visit our website at thoughtleadershipleverage.com. To reach me directly, feel free to email me at peter@thoughtleadershipleverage.com. And please subscribe to Leveraging Thought Leadership on iTunes or your favorite podcast app to get your weekly episode automatically.